month. So we're kind of a hybrid thing going on, and we'll just look at and see. So I think quite a lot of people, not everybody would know, my name's Nickala. I'm one of the founding directors at Flourish Together. You'll know we're an organisation that supports or reinvests our profits in supporting women as a force for social change, helping them, earn a living whilst making a difference, lead all sorts of change in their communities. And Shelley and I, and Shelley's going to lead our panel conversation at the moment, have been working with lots of you actually over the last year or more, and prior to that, and we've been trying to think what's the best way to use our time and bring people together and fill knowledge and skills gaps with everybody between now and the end of the year. And given the bits of contracts and funds and whatnot that we've got in place, we came up with this Flourishing Mondays concept. And there is a Flourishing Fridays going to be coming as well. I'll tell you about in a second. But today is the first official Flourishing Monday, I think, isn't it? We've had a couple. I think some of you have come to help sort of plan, co-design things a little bit, feed into what we're doing. But ultimately, between now and next March-ish, we're backed by the Business Growth Hub, Manchester City Council, and there's a bit of NatWest money left, meaning that we plan to work with around 50 to 70 people in this time frame, all in slightly different ways. So with the Business Growth Hub, they're helping us work with 20 women who've perhaps been running ventures for some time, and they're scaling what they're doing, and there's a number of you here who are kind of on that track. With Manchester City Council, they're asking us to work specifically with people in North Manchester, but also other ventures that are around as well, and other people involved in this, but they don't have to be so established. Technically, they should be in Manchester. And then with the NatWest money, it's a bit of a catch-all for everything else, because as many of you all know, we don't like saying no to people if we can help it. And the beauty of running these Mondays, and Shelley will hand out some little flyers, I think we've now pinned down the topics for these. So some of you will think you would have seen this if you've been to one of these already, but this little schedule that she's handing round gives you the dates of the Flourishing Mondays coming up, and we've now pinned sort of thematic sessions with them. For anyone that doesn't know, these days really are a way to connect people together, which will happen anyway as part of what happens today. They're a way to fill knowledge and skills gaps and get stuff done. What we realised was we've worked with a lot of people, a lot of women on the different programmes, and Time to Grow, Ellie, and other support that we've been offering to people. And what people said they wanted was time to put the learning into action, time to embed things, rushing everything on Zoom in these sort of hour chunks to keep people's attention doesn't necessarily give you the best time to really embed things and make these tools and resources that we've given you work. So the plan is, as you'll see, can I have one, Shelley? I know I should know this, that's not off the top of my head, but so the plan is each of the days coming up, I can't believe it, there's only about 7 or 8 between now and the end of the year, and we're already stuck for topics. There's more we want to do. It's just one of those things. So you'll see the themes there. Some of them will resonate with you, and you'll know, oh, I need to come to that one. Some of them perhaps less so, but either way, the format of these days is from about 10 till 12. We'll have a kind of settle in, there'll be like a bit of a discussion panel or a bit of a workshop or thing, and then from 12 till about 4, it's more informal. And so from this afternoon, about 12 till half 12, it's kind of a bit of a lunch break. There's some bakeries and shops up the way, Asda's not too far. I think there's, don't quote me, there's something like an Aldi or a Lidl that way, but there's stuff around. We've got some nibbles, tea and coffee is obviously on tap, and juice and stuff. We'll take that break, and then from about half 12 for an hour or so, we'll create some thematic discussions based on what people want to talk about, and building on a few things. And then there's kind of free time to kind of plan, do, work on stuff. And we're just taking them as they go, really, trying to be flexible and meet people's needs as they're here. What we are doing this afternoon, it might be worth you having a look at if you haven't already, is Shelley, Nikki and myself will be offering one-to-ones. I'm sure Grace is around for a little while to network with over lunch and stuff, but don't think you're here for the afternoon bit. So 15-20 minute one-to-ones we've got to kind of check in with people, and this is the kind of format that will flow over these days. So the idea is there's talks and a workshop, there's discussion and getting stuff done, peer learning and troubleshooting stuff, and then time for you to think, do, or keep chatting to whoever's most suited. If it's people on a table who are your peers, brilliant. If it's checking in on a funding bid or a business plan or a marketing strategy or something else, you know, we've got this time carved out to try and create one-to-ones with people and either catch up on support that we're providing or check in with people and where they're at. So we're going to see how it goes with these sessions. There's time to evolve them. You know, we'll be gathering feedback from people by September-ish, just to check, are we on the right track here? Is there anything else we need to do? And I'm always about squeezing the most value possible out of any of these sorts of events. So if people know that they might come to a few of these over the course of the year and there's something they want to do or try or present, or we need I don't know, we need to be collecting stuff for communities, or we need to be, you know, lobbying for stuff, I don't know, but I know that across our networks there's a lot we can do as part of a kind of strength in numbers approach. So we're open to your ideas as much as these are kind of learning and development days. So we'll just see where we get between now and the end of the year. Cool. So I think that's enough for me, other than perhaps to say where the loos and whatnot is, and then I'll hand over to Shelley to kick off with our panels and stuff. So loos, for anyone that's not been, is sort of back corner. There's a toilet, or upstairs there is. We've checked, we've got loo roll, we're all okay. Tea and coffee, some of you will have seen, but help yourself to whatever you need there. And there's some snacks and nibbles around the side. We're not expecting any fire drills or anything else. But if we feel the need, then we can head out of this building, make sure that we can meet on, there's a piece of grass opposite this little building or set of buildings. We'll meet on the grass over there if there's any issues, or we need to vacate for any fire or other hazardous reasons. I don't think there's anything else.
That sounds good.
Cool. So we'll just thank you for giving your time and for coming, getting stuck in, and trusting us with our kind of new way of working, and we'll see how it all goes.
Thanks, Nickala.
No worries. And hi, Samira. We'll look out for anyone else who's dialing in on Zoom.
Right, so I'll just take this opportunity to welcome our income generation panel, and we decided to start with income generation because it's something that comes up a lot, and the community was telling us that's what they needed. And without income, we can't sustain our enterprises, we can't sustain ourselves. So it's obviously a really cool topic. So we've got a fantastic panel here today. To my right, we have Grace Dyke. And I think I'd have introduced you once as one half of Yellow Jigsaw, but I'm just chatting to you now. I don't think I can do that now. Yeah, the Yellow Jigsaw is growing and flourishing. So we'll hear a little bit more about your journey in a bit. So Yellow Jigsaw is a social enterprise in itself and a media and communications consultancy. And we'll have Grace back in your to talk to us about your our media and communications days in September. Yeah, it's back in September. Yeah. So yeah, this is Grace. Then we have Nicki Dickins. So Nicki runs Profit for Purpose. Nicki has been working in and around social enterprise for how long would you say?
20 years.
20 years. And offers consultancy to all sorts of different social enterprise and purpose-led organisations. And they have Nickala, who I think pretty much everyone here already knows, but you've been working in and around social enterprise for
good 20 years.
Good 20 years in various different capacities on the funder side, obviously running social enterprise Flourish herself and offering consultancy and all sorts of policy-led initiatives. You know, she's got her finger in pies across. And this is so where what we'll come on to is seeing the kind of range of places that you can get involved in terms of generating an income for your venture. And the more diversity you have there, and this is something that everyone on our panel really excels in. So welcome everyone. And what we'll do, I've got some questions here which I'm going to ask the panel, and then we'll take questions. I think if you have a question as we go along, it's really informal, so do ask as we go, but there'll be an opportunity to ask questions as well at the end. So note down anything that you'd like to ask our panelists. Brilliant. So I'll start with Nicki.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. No pressure. Nicki, do you want to start by telling us a little bit about your journey to start building your income mix, and also a bit about what it looks like at the moment? So what sort of proportions are coming from where, and how you got to where you are, and where did you start out, and how you got to where you are today?
Oh, right, okay.
Not
So
your breakfast.
yeah, so I started off in this world working for Women's Royal Voluntary Service. I don't know if anybody knows them, but basically tea bars in hospitals and cafes, etc. So I was the regional manager, so for hospitals. So I looked after those all throughout the Northwest. And I fell in love with the concept that you could sell a cup of coffee, and then the profit from that coffee would go back to the hospital for patient care. So I worked there for 5 years, crossed over to the volunteering side, and then looked after volunteers for the whole of the service over Greater Manchester, and then transferred over to the opposition, the League of Friends. And that was around setting up new community friends in the community, things like patient transport, prescription collection services. And as part of that role, I sat on the Department of Health sounding board for social enterprise, which at the time was an interesting one because they were looking at changing the law so that anybody within the NHS could request to set up a social enterprise.
It's like a spin-out scheme, wasn't it?
It was, yes. And there was £78 million put into it, so a hefty effort on that. And the actual board was actually run by Andy Burnham, which was interesting at the time because he was health minister.
And while you were doing this, Nicki, just to be clear in my mind, you were employed, so you were almost like an intrapreneur. Yes. within a system, within a public, sort of bit of a public sector / voluntary community sector. Yeah,
both WRVS and the National Association of Hospital Community Friends, what a nightmare to say. They were both affiliated to the government, so they had sort of baronesses on the board and all sorts of things like that. So that's why we were invited to take part in the panel.
What was the name of the organisation
that I work for? Women's Royal Voluntary Service.
WRVS.
WRVS. It's now, they've taken the W off, it's now Royal Voluntary Service. And in fact, now they manage the NHS Responders programme during COVID.
Okay, Women's World.
Oh, sorry, Royal Voluntary Service.
Voluntary Service.
Yes.
Royal.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, from being a kid in a hospital anywhere, whoever was running the cafe with the tabards on, that's the WRVS or the League of Friends.
Yeah,
it's that kind of
either one or the other.
20p for a cup of coffee type stuff, but it was back in the day, so it'll probably change a bit now.
Yeah, I mean, the point in looking at developing social enterprise in hospitals came from, so it's called Time for Health. It came from the amount of work the volunteers put in hospitals and how they could expand that. And so at the time, they were looking at contracting out all the health services rather than them being delivered in-house, which is now in place now on the other side of that. And of course, they were concerned, they wanted about 60% of delivery of health services delivered by social enterprise. And there was only at the time around 6%. It was very, very new. It was 2010. So yeah, so
change, but not massive, not in the way that you would imagine. Okay.
No, it wasn't, and it was very old-fashioned, I think, at the stage. So yeah, so we launched the programme. It was called Right to Request, and there's over 100 spin-outs that have happened since then. My organisation was the provider to help people spin out their social enterprises out of hospitals. So, and
when you say your organisation, was that the organisation you were working for? Or
Make It Happen, which was my first.
That you set up. So you set that up, yeah.
So I spent a lot of time doing that, and then it went over to the Cabinet Office, to the government. So it went mainstream. So anybody who worked for the government was able to request to set up a social enterprise. And I got a guaranteed grant, a guaranteed contract for 3 years, and access to a loan. So it was a very, very good programme.
Has there ever been any research, you know, to go back and see how many of those are still running now? Or?
Interestingly, no. No.
So project for it.
Yeah, there was 100 in total. that spun out, and everything really from the vehicle licensing agency spun out as a social enterprise. So that's one sort of example. Huge sort of colleges, education centres, through to health services, through to old and young people services. So it was a pretty good time at the time, and this was under the new Labour programme. So when the new government came through, they completely stopped it all. They didn't recognise social enterprise. Which was a shame.
Well, not in the same way.
Not in the
I think
same way,
society, wasn't it? Society took over.
But I continued to carry on and do what I did. Went back to university, so I did a master's in social enterprise management, which I absolutely loved. And then started working with Nickala in the universities and delivering social enterprise programmes in universities. So I've sort of been straddled between university spin-outs and NHS public service spin-outs.
What's a spin-out?
So a spin-out is when a social enterprise is spun out of public
or
service.
any company could be described as a spin-out. Where some innovation has happened in health, in the university, in anywhere, but if there's an innovation going on, and rather than have it hidden in the institution, and they can either convince, back, or entrust that leader or the entrepreneur of that thing to lead it outside, it's fiddly, it's not straightforward. And whoever's the owner of this spin out, the public sector body quite often, they want to own the IP and the intellectual property, and that's where social enterprises are less attractive as spin-outs, because their methods and their values and the way they operate don't neatly tie in with that commercialisation model that health and social care places do. But there are some great hybrid things I know you've been working on. So where people are looking for partners, the health sector and universities and other traditional institutions can be a useful ally. We can probably come back to that as a question at one time.
So Nicki, in terms of your income generation mix at the moment, so who, in broad terms, who is paying you to do what?
Yeah, so I've got a crossover. So I've got some NHS trusts that pay me direct for the spin outs. I've got about 2 or 3 spin outs still on the go. So that's in the transition period of helping them spin out to supporting them as a social enterprise going forward. And then the university, so I'm a social entrepreneur in residence at Sheffield University, 1 day a week, so the university pays for that. And then I have 2 projects which are clients that I've worked with for a long time, where we've just got in funding to deliver feasibility projects for their programme. And that's under the Healthy Ageing banner with Innovate UK. And it's about people ageing better. So I've got one project which is Pathways to Movement, so it's connecting people with movement opportunities. And the other project I have is developing a real-time assessment tool for occupational therapy. So that's being able to do the assessments for people who need equipment and being able to do them virtually and make them quicker so that people can get the equipment in. So that's just a few of sort of what I do. So,
and listening in there and thinking people here who are trying to work out different ways to earn a living, make a difference in all of this. But reading between the lines, being an intrapreneur is no bad thing actually. We might find there's a theme around that, where we started and how we were an entrepreneur before we did our own ventures.
Nickala, do you want to explain what an entrepreneur is?
So an entrepreneur is an entrepreneur within a day job or within an institution. So entrepreneurial skills and characteristics are human nature, frankly. Well, they are in my opinion, but just to live, survive, run a household, do whatever we need to do. There's entrepreneurial skills and characteristics there. And what happens is sometimes we end up being quite entrepreneurial in our jobs. It depends what we're doing and who our boss is and lots of different things. But I was just picking up on that being an entrepreneur is no bad thing, and it can often be a comfy place to be, to road test ideas or to build your confidence. So what often happens with people in Flourish is they may or may not be in the right job, or a job that can support what they're doing. And we'll often post a lot of jobs on our Flourish Facebook page, because actually working for somebody else can sometimes be a great test bed or space to earn your stripes and your craft, whilst you're fretting, how am I going to make this thing viable? And sometimes, you know, we'll see it might come up as a theme.
So my main product and service is consultancy and training. So I deliver training on social entrepreneurship. Yeah, so far I've set up 380 social enterprises and brought in about 1.65 million for those organisations. So yeah, specialist in income generation, setting up and legal structures of a social enterprise.
Well, we've been working with Nicki for like over 5 years, and Nicki's part of our support team as part of the programme.
Yeah, and so yeah, and in addition to that, I'm a social accountant, which we'll talk about at some stage, I think, on another programme. So yeah, so majority of mine, it's not always been this way. Right at the beginning, we worked exactly the same as Flourish does. So we help organisations get funding to pay for business support. So very reliant on funding for a long while. In fact, in 20 years, this is the first time I've had any contracts longer than 3 months. So yeah.
That's a good point. And yeah, and I was just going to say that you know, consultancy work is a key part of what you do, getting projects funded that you can then manage as part of a collaboration. Yeah. And there's this, I think, I don't know, again, it's a bit of a running theme, we'll see, because there's a gap in the charity and social enterprise world for people who know how to manage social enterprises. If you've got those skills, another strand to consultancy work, which we've probably all got in some respect, is we're not just doing consultancy in bid writing or business planning or marketing or PR or whatever. We're getting paid to do a lot more hands-on operational stuff, because nobody else does it. You know, there's a gap in people who've got managerial skills in social enterprise. Yeah, just a thought, if you've got that mindset and those skills, there's a need. What you might think you're going to run art workshops, and you might think you're going to run, I don't know, group work on such and such, but actually there's a whole range of skills and gaps in what people need to run community organisations, and it might be your knowledge, your career, your skill set can deliver some of that in addition to the other stuff. That's what some of us have found.
Excellent. And I think that probably segues really nicely onto Grace's journey and how you started to generate income for your organisation and where you've got to now, because you've got an interesting mix there which does draw on some of these things that Nickala's just mentioned.
Yeah, definitely. It was a bit of a one-track mind kind of approach when we started, and now it's sprawling and still sprawling and testing different ways of trying to generate income. But Yellow Jigsaw started about 7 years ago by myself and my colleague Kirsty. We met whilst we were working at Alzheimer's Society. I was running campaigns and Kirsty was there running the media side of stuff after being a reporter at the MEN for 12 years. So we were naturally working really closely together, and we worked really well together. And we both shared this view, really, that in any social enterprise, in any charity, and whilst we're working at Alzheimer's Society, it was the people that you exist to help and to support who should be the spokespeople, who should be telling their stories. So we worked really closely with people living with dementia, people who still work with us now at Yellow Jigsaw, because, you know, we've formed such good relationships with them, who develop their confidence, and they're just so powerful, you know, trying to lobby and campaign and change policy on behalf of the organisation by sharing their own stories. And that's kind of what made us spin out, if you like, and set up Yellow Jigsaw with that purpose at its heart, because I think some organisations can get so big, they kind of lose the purpose and they start making everything about themselves. So we moved out with the view that every person has the best story to tell, they just need the skills and the confidence to do it. So we're kind of backed up by this overarching social mission that the same people who make the news should be the people who read and watch the news, us, which at the moment is tragically not the case. I think it's about 80% of
And I know that you said that you spin out.
Yeah.
You moved out and did what exactly? And how what the kind of steps?
Yeah, I made that sound really simple.
Yeah.
It wasn't. So we set up Yellow Jigsaw as a community interest company, but that whole process probably took over a year. We're like, Kirsty's got 2 kids, I don't have kids, but I'm quite risk averse. You know, we're all worried about income. We were leaving 2 secure jobs to take this unknown leap.
Was
So,
it about that time you were in touch with us before we even called Flourish? Was it around that time, or did that come later? People might not know that Grace and Kirsty probably are on our first mentorathon about 8 years ago. And I know, you know.
I think we probably met both of you probably 6 to 12 months down the line. I don't even know how I found out about Flourish, but Flourish was there from the very early stages to connect with this network and to tell us what the hell we should be doing, and to be around people that could motivate us and share our experiences. And I also went on the School of Social Entrepreneurs startup program, which is where I met Shelley. So it's nice, all full circle.
So how did you survive in the first 12 months?
So we went part-time. So we both left and got part-time jobs elsewhere, whilst we then used the spare time to build up the income for Yellow Jigsaw. And the one-track mind thing was focusing purely on trading income. So our first service, if you like, and our core service was PR consultancy. So think of a PR agency that helps organizations to get into the news. That was kind of our bread and butter, but we were not for profit. We were doing it for other not for profits, and we were doing it with this mindset that forget the organization, we're going to work with your beneficiaries, we're going to upskill them and help them to tell their stories as much as we possibly can. So it was a slightly different take, but it was still about trying to get retainers in, so clients who would pay us on a monthly basis, half a day a month, whatever it might be, build that up. And then we didn't build it up enough to leave the part-time jobs and fully replace the income, but we built it up enough to the point where it just all became unbearable. And I'm sure that you've all had these moments where you just get a gut feeling, like we knew when we needed to leave Alzheimer's Society. It wasn't just about income, it was about a conflict in what you're doing every day. And we reached that point with the part-time jobs as well. Kirsty is a lot braver than me. She's got an effort attitude, so she gave us the shove each time really to make those next steps.
And sometimes you need a co-person or a co-founder or someone to help you. And
know
sometimes
how
you
fortunate
don't. And it's sort of, you know, there's no right or wrong way, but
no, but I would say if I didn't have Kirsty, and even though I do have Kirsty, you know, even from the beginning I was looking for School of Social Entrepreneurs, Flourish, to try and find people who could fill my gaps, I guess, and who I could turn to for advice and different aspects of knowledge and motivation. So when we did make that final leap into working full-time on Yellow Jigsaw, that's when it all gathered momentum, because we had the time and the capacity to really, and we had to make it work. We had to get money in to pay ourselves. So that's what we did. And like I said, that core service of PR consultancy grew. We brought in associates to help deliver that work. And then
that's not uncommon. I'm only picking up on that because you can panic and think, oh, how do I grow this? Or what if I get ill? Or maybe not even realise that. But, you know, how do I make sure everything keeps running once these things happen? And I think all of us have had an associate model. So we've not necessarily taken on employees straight away. We've contracted people. So I know everybody complains about 0 hours contracts, but as a freelancer, actually, that's often the way things work. And you're certainly not on peanuts, or shouldn't be on peanuts for doing that kind of work. And it's something to bear in mind. If you know that you're going to need some help at some point, we might come back to that as a question.
I was going to say, we still do that.
Yeah,
we still have each other as associates to cover in case we get bombed down with work.
Or that you don't need to panic about being set up for payroll or this, that, or something else, or being an employer. You know, having, you know, whatever you want to call them, freelancers, associates, people who, you know, who come in to support with something specific, whether it's delivering something key within your team, or whether that's how you work with marketing, social media, or anyone else. You don't have to, take on employees until you're good and ready.
How easy is it to find early associates?
Usually through your network. Oh, well, often
Depends
it's
what you-
people you
depends
know,
what and who you're looking
or you
for.
can put out. I mean, we've got a whole session on staffing in HR, which will look at this, kind of how you transition from being, say, one person to developing an organisation. So we'll go into that in a bit more detail. Just think it's really interesting hearing Grace talk, and I think you find this a lot with social entrepreneurs about the diversity of products and services they've got, and the diversity of income mix. So when we first met, you had your core products and service, and you were deciding whether to go ahead with Media Cubs, which you now run, and it thrives, and it's just one more of your products and services. And I think that kind of test, and you talked about testing, kind of having an openness to trying something. So you might have your core thing, but then actually that's an opportunity because there's an income stream there, or there's a need there, or it complements what you do, or there's a group of people who are great who you could work with on this thing. Often it can be that drives it.
And it can be time limited, that, lots of people are very ideas people, and they need reining in sometimes. I think testing things out is a test, and it either you set yourself some criteria and benchmarks in terms of impact, in terms of money, in terms of capacity to do this thing, and over a 6 or 12-month period or 18 months, it works or it doesn't, and you either shelve it or you continue with it.
And that's very much the mentality of people in Silicon Valley. They ask themselves, how quickly can I test this? How can I do this as quickly as possible? They don't overthink it, don't do loads of prelim and high production values. It's like, how quickly can I test this and either develop it or move on to the next idea? So what does your, again, in broad terms, who pays you and for what now?
So just on associates, I've got to say, get to know people first. We have a lot of former MEN reporters, so we trust them. Kirsty obviously knew them first, so that answer for the associate question.
Trust is huge.
And in terms of income, it's already making me rub my head like that because it's quite complex in a good way. So as well as the core service, we now have quite a few what we call community media projects. So we have Media Cubs, which is a pop-up TV studio and newsroom for kids, and that is all about turning them into confident communicators through a TV studio where they do reporting, directing, filming. And then on the other end of the age spectrum, we've got the UK's first older people's-led newsroom. So that's an online news platform called Talking About My Generation. It's run by 26 reporters from across Greater Manchester. They've got a podcast, print magazine, social media community, as well as that news site, which is publishing stories every day. So it has evolved. That's the sprawling bit, but that's the really fun, purpose-driven bit.
Were they piloted through funding initially, or did somebody commission you to do these, or where did the money come from to initiate?
Good question. And that the answer kind of defines how our relationship with grants has changed. At first, I was like, no, not relying on grants. It's too time limited. It's stop-start, it's unreliable, let's just get loads of trading income. And that was silly. I do not recommend thinking like that. It's a really fantastic way to test and develop ideas, not just ideas, but the way you could then, after the funding's run out, generate revenue from those ideas.
And make impact, isn't it? It's harder to make impact with when you're chugging away to get the clients in, unless those clients share your values or create things that you see are important.
So we did try to take the trading surplus, any surplus we had, let's use it to cover our time for these passion projects, really.
What were you trading?
We were trading in consultancy, so pay us and we'll get you in the press.
Media,
we'll do,
PR.
But that can only work for so long. We needed dedicated funding to really test and develop. So we started with an Awards for All with Media Cubs, then some Trafford Housing Trust funding.
I remember sitting in a pub writing that out.
There you go. How long ago was that? And then with Talking About My Generation, we were part of a 12-month actually media consultancy project. That was how it was sold to us. All the age UKs in Greater Manchester needed a media partner to run this ageism campaign, and we brought our community media approach to it and said, actually, we're not the right people to run this campaign. We should be training up older residents to tell their own stories. So we had 12 months funding to kind of not shoehorn, but develop the idea with our principals through a contract. So
And
now,
sometimes they call those things a grant agreement as well, depending on who it's from.
Yeah.
Terminology here.
yeah, because that was kind of like, it wasn't us applying for funding and saying we want to do this with it. It was, here's something we need doing. This is the spec. This is the money. Why are you the best people to do it? That was the application process. So slightly different towards For All, where it's, can I have some money to do my idea, please? So after we tested those, and by test I mean A, saw if they worked, B, tried to explore different revenue streams, and C, tried to show the impact. So we measured the impact of Media Cubs on communication, confidence skills, self-belief of kids. We worked with students from Manchester Met to evaluate the impact of talking about my generation. So we had stats to show how powerful it is when older people deliver health and wellbeing messages to other older people. We kind of got as much as we could out of that funded period to then move into the unknown world of trying to make it work off our own backs.
When you got the was it media students to evaluate the work?
It was something called Q steps. Look it up because they do it every year. So they're sociology students, and they have to do a real life program of evaluation.
Which is that particularly in
MMU. It's predominantly focused on quantitative research. So we work with them to develop the questionnaire. You still have to do a lot of the legwork in terms of, you know, getting the word out there to your service users or whoever they are, to get them to complete the questionnaire, but then they produce this fantastic report and all the stats, and you know, we still use that now 2 years down the line to show like, this is a really lovely thing, but also behind the loveliness there's some real impact here. So in terms of revenue streams, if you think of Media Cubs, we do after school clubs, so we charge schools directly for that, or we charge the parents depending on, you know, the area and whether they can afford that. We charge councils to deliver holiday clubs. So that's kind of simple. We deliver a service, we get paid for it. Where we've tried to be creative is to get commissions. So we work with our Media Cubs reporters to develop videos, and the likes of theatre companies would pay us to create those videos with the kids because they're kids friendly performances. So it's kind of like PR consultancy, but with the kids. So yeah, a nice well-rounded package of income there. And we also get grant funding to deliver targeted projects, perhaps in areas of really high levels of deprivation when no one's going to be able to pay, but we know those are the kids that really need this kind of confidence and communication boost. We talked about my generation. We are trying to position ourselves as a bit of a media partner to public health organisations. So councils need to get messages out to older people, whether that was during COVID, keeping well at winter, getting moving. And our argument with the stats from MMU is who better to do that than older people themselves, coming up with the messages, delivering it. We've got an audience. Why are you doing it when Jean from Chadderton could be doing it? So it's a social enterprise project. You know, it's really purpose driven, but we're still trying to think of how we can deliver a service and fill a need for our public sector colleagues.
And you know, with innovation or with specialist forms of stakeholder engagement there, and again, those two things, buzzwords, are ways to
using the right language. It's kind of like in the middle being a translator, aren't you? So they may pay us to do a series of news stories on keeping active, or they might commission the reporters to do a podcast chat on they commissioned us to do one around how to get out and how to build your confidence again after the lockdown restrictions have lifted. So yeah, we're kind of helping to deliver their public health messages in a very non-public health way. So it's really sprawling.
It's sprawling, but you can see it's really interesting how Yellow Jigsaw aren't just delivering a project, they're always got an eye on the business development pipeline. And I think that's the thing. So whenever you're successful in whether it's a grant or a contract, it's thinking about what's next, what data do I need to gather here in order to be developing things further down the road.
Yeah, and thinking, I think Media Cubs and my generation are good examples of this, and you will all have this ability. Who are your beneficiaries? Who do you have a connection to? And who needs that connection that you've already got? So in our cases, you know, councils need that connection to older people. So we are a broker. We're going to charge them for that kind of access. So who do you work with that organisations need to engage with, work with, learn from? How can you kind of monetize your role as being an expert in that network?
And it's really, really true that we're doing a similar thing at the university, where they have everybody knows that they put students within placements within industry, but they never measure it. So one thing I'm working with them on is to measure the value of knowledge exchange. So the value of that knowledge that's exchanged between the university student and the community group that they're placed in. So we're looking specifically at charities and social enterprises, because I never valued that before. Now that knowledge, so Nickala will know the same as me because we both do a similar thing there, is that if you have that ability to connect to community organisations that other people don't have, that's what you can sell as consultants. Exactly the same as Grace is there, because believe it or not, out there's not many people that can do that. So that's a real good way to sort of generate income.
It's like you were saying, it's a broker of connections, it's a broker of innovation, it's a broker of stakeholder engagement. These are the sort of terms, or it might be events that you're running, it might be training, it might be research and conversations, it might be giving people a voice and amplifying people's voices, be that for different reasons. It's a commodity that, and you have to be careful. You're not taking advantage of your community, and you're not wanting to put them at risk in any way or be exploited from who it is that's wanting this stuff. You have to be careful as to who you choose to work with. Partly down to cost, partly down to people's values and levels of manipulation, and partly down to people's levels of lip service, and will the piece of work that you ever do with them translate into something meaningful. You have to really be careful, but you work that out, or you can talk to other people who've done it and think, is this the right partnership? Is this the right project? Is this the right thing? And just weigh it up.
Speak to beneficiaries. We always go to the news team and say, such and such wants to work with you. What do you think? Do you want to do this? Yeah. So it's always their decision, and we just make sure everything is a really enriching learning opportunity for them. That they don't feel like they're delivering a service, they're just getting loads out of it and feel really satisfied. And there's this amazing progress that you see them go through when they realise people care about what they think. And all of them said, I felt like I've been tossed on the scrap heap after I retired, felt like it didn't matter anymore. They don't see themselves in the news, no one listens to them. So even consultancy and doing that kind of work does have a really powerful social impact.
Can I ask you a couple of questions that relate to what you said, or should I wait to the end?
No, far away.
So there's a lot of organisations that are saying right now, place-based, and listening to people with lived experiences, and it's all very, I think, very superficial. Where I'm coming from, and I feel that that people with lived experiences can be consultants and should be giving advice to those services that aren't meeting the needs. So there's a lot of full-time staff that are working in community centres that aren't reaching people because they don't have the right they don't have the experiences, so they don't have the empathy, so they're missing out on bringing those people in. And in the council as well, from where I'm sitting, I'm not from where I am.
Yeah.
So so there was two things, like how do you go about it as a volunteer? So for example, I've been into a community centre and went to an event that was about sharing your stories. Nobody was there. And then the guy that was running it said, oh, we had to cancel it. And I said, well, why did you, and I kind of basically criticised their marketing strategy and suggested, how they could improve it. So you know, if that's giving consultancy, then how do you get paid for that consultancy? And they've asked, you know, they said, oh, well, you can come to the meeting in a couple of weeks. It's a stakeholder meeting in a couple of weeks. And I was thinking, yeah, I could come, but, you know, and I think a lot of people, maybe what I'm saying is echoed in the community, that why should I give you the information? Because you need to pay me for it. So, you know, we could go there and say, this is what you need to be doing, A, B, C, D, E, and F, you know, bringing people from lived experiences to run those projects. But I think
It's a fine line, isn't it? You know, criticising people who you want to pay in future is a very fine line to tread. Be really careful around that. You might want to give them a mouthful, but you have to kind of think about, you know, the repercussions of some of that. I think, like it or not, there's an awful lot of free stuff that you have to do in order to get to the point where you're going to get some paid work. It's not, every business has lost leaders, and it's, you know, sitting in that stakeholder engagement meeting or going to that event or whatever it is, you have to track your diary and check that you aren't going willy-nilly and having all of these networking meetings, events or whatever else and getting nothing back from it. But carefully looking at what you're doing and why. You know, you're not sat there not getting paid, you're sat there planning how you're going to put a proposal together to get them to pay you to do X, Y, and Z. And, you know,
I'd echo that completely. I'm skirting over how difficult everything is, isn't it? That's why we have a network to keep us going. But, you know, I've had exactly the same experience as you, that, you know, a communications officer in a council may not really want to hand over the job to an older person because, you know, you're kind of questioning their role in a way. Some councils really get it, and those are the ones we are the quick wins, if you like, and the others you kind of have to show them. So every example I've given you of my generation, a podcast chat, a blog series, we did an example first and then we had something to show, because it's quite hard to convince people if they don't automatically share your vision. And you know, you're so right in the way that you want to do it, but if people have been working a certain way for so many years, you kind of just got to show it them and show them how well the example went. And that's the lost leader.
Be very carefully, don't give all your secrets away in the first thing.
Yeah, don't tell them how you did it.
Carefully plan what you do so that it was enough of your free time to create what was needed, do, learn, connect with whatever you needed to do, and build relationships to progress it, whatever it is. It's suitably vague there because everybody's cases are really different, but it's a bit like we were saying before, piloting and testing things. You don't pilot and test things more in a day. You give yourself whatever it is, 6 weeks, 6 months, you know, and likewise with a kind of relationship. If within 2 or 3 meetings, or if within a couple of things that you've engaged with somebody who you think you'd like to collaborate and partner with, if it's not moved to that within a number of meetings, then, you know, they're probably, you're wasting your time, and move on to the next thing, or learn from what you did and turn it into your own funded project and do it anyway and show them up. And then 6 months to 12 months down the line, when you've done what they should have been doing, and they'll come back to you and go, So there's different ways to.
And I think we'll be drilling down to this in more detail. So specifically on the media and comms side, and when Grace is back, and then we'll be looking at the social value side. So it's telling your story, showing, you know, the different ways that you can share your story, but then there's also evidencing your impacts, which we'll go into in more detail. So that's the way, you know, you do a little bit for free, and then you have the evidence to try and pull together that proposal, that convincing, compelling, you know, media assets and so forth.
The other opportunity is funding. So I work with a lot of my clients to get funding in to do that testing, and so there's always a key thing within that first application is to do something called social return, to forecast your social return on investment. So we do that within that first sort of funding bid, wide stakeholder engagement, to get that evidence base that this is what's needed.
And lots of people when they first get going, they don't think like this. We try to help them, not just because we want to get paid to do it and we'll do a good job of it, but because if you've got your 10k was for your 5k We Love Manchester Award or something from Hall Hamlin or something from Limited or wherever, people often see these funds as like, oh, well, I'll get off and I'll run my project. And once you've run your project, you've done no evaluation, you've built no capacity to business develop the thing. So what we try to help people to think about is, if you're going to apply for funding, or if you're going to do something and pilot it, don't just pilot it. Do all of this, and this is suitably vague. Some of you have learned it on different sessions, but it's basically building in either within your own networks or your own volunteers, or bringing in specialists to kind of plan down a bare minimum so that you can communicate what your impact would be if you did, or what your impact has been when you have, or getting the right amount of information together so that you're not come to the end of your project or your pilot or your thing and gone, now what? Because it was already pre-planned in from the start, and you get to the end of it and you've either known which relationships you needed to press on through the pilot, or known which evidence and information to gather so that you could do that next step bit, or like what Nicki's describing here, projecting impact and value is another way as well, that people can force people to take them seriously and listen and build a track record, even if they've not done much yet.
So you want to be in a position with the first bid where you've got a business plan that can lead you into the second stage of funding. So you need to sort of do all that work at an early stage.
And sometimes it takes two or three goes actually. 2 or 3. I mean, the beauty with the lottery is you can use 2 or 3 awards for alls to do a range of things before you go to the second stage time when you're larger money. That's part of their model. That's how they work. And as much as you said you need a business plan, for some people they do, and for others they just need to do it and have evidence. We know lots of women and men who would, hide in business planning for 2 years.
Yeah, it's a nice procrastination tool. It can be.
As long as it's action orientated and you're doing your stakeholder engagement stuff, you're piloting things as part of it, you're gathering really important research and information, then it'll all come together a lot quicker.
I'd say at that point as well, you're getting this funding, or you're going to do this loss leading pilot to prove that your idea works. I'd say still be flexible with how that idea might evolve during that pilot, and listen to what the people you want to work with say to you. So an example I've got is, we did a pilot with Trafford Council to deliver Media Cups holiday sessions, and you go in and think, what's going to be the sell for the council? And for me, I was saying it's heavily sports orientated, these camps. So Media Cubs can come in and it can provide communication, confidence development for the non-sporty kids, and for the sporty kids it can engage them in non-sporting literacy activities. That was what I thought would be the tick. And then the man came back with something I just completely wasn't expecting, was, can you get them to film the whole camp? And then we've got kids-led video evaluation, which we can share with the Department of Education. And I just went, ears pricked up, hadn't thought of that. And then I went to every other council and thought, well, if that council wants it, let's go in with, we can provide you with a kids-led Department of Education evaluation. We've got tons of work from it. And I think that's a good example of, if I was blinkered, then I would have missed that. And you've got to kind of be not fully led by the people you want money from, but be inspired by them. If it's still aligned with what you want to do.
Customer's always right, aren't they?
Yeah, just listen out to what they're really after.
We do something called values intelligence. So the program we take our clients on, to do a business plan is not just, okay, we're going to sit down and write a business plan. It's a series of workshops so that I can transfer my knowledge over. So that my clients understand, and they can then go and do that themselves. And one of the things we do right at the beginning is something called value intelligence. And it's so simple, but people don't do it. And that's basically go and ask, look at your stakeholders, who your stakeholders are, and you need a value proposition for them. What do they value? So you go out and ask them. that enables you not to be just scattering seeds, you know, and hoping they grow, but to actually be able to tell them we're delivering what you said you wanted. And to me, it's a no-brainer. It's not rocket science, you know.
It's not, but it's really interesting.
Language.
It's a different way of marketing, isn't it? I think people often think about marketing as being, here's what we're selling, I need to go and sell people, find people who want it. But actually what you've just talked about, it's listening to your customer and then providing what they need.
Yes, and then it's so much easier, less pain.
I'm conscious of time, so Nickala, I just want to...
I was just going to quickly say as well, what Nick has just described there on the 10th of October is part of what we're going to be doing, social value and evidencing need. We have run workshops on all of this on Zoom. There's listening again options through Time to Grow programs that some people have been on, things like that, but this is a day where we'll focus in on that theme as well.
So Nickala, if I could just come to you and ask who your customers are and, you know, broadly what they pay for, and maybe if an idea of how you found them as well.
Yeah, so different things. So in listening to everything that I've been hearing, I'm just going to do that recap if I'm allowed to say, you know, being an entrepreneur is no bad thing. So I started off being entrepreneurial within the charity sector. I was a furniture designer by trade back in the day, and I got quite quickly bored with that, and the ethics and values of the private sector didn't suit me. The public sector, I just had a bit slow. And so the charity sector, which I stumbled across when I was 22, was like, you know, it all came together, and I'm, you know, kind of braved my way into just getting a job with Unlimited before Unlimited even existed, and I helped them set up this new charity, and, you know, everything from, you know, washing the carpets to assembling the furniture to helping design their awards programs, their applications, and everything else. And I went in. The charity sector is a really good playground, whether you've worked in it or not. If you want to build your skills, you want to test what you're doing, they struggle to recruit in the charity sector, partly because people don't understand the charity sector exists. The salaries in the charity sector are not that bad compared to other industries. So you're not going in working for free, you're getting paid to do stuff. When I came out of the furniture world, I was instantly earning more as a, what was it called, administration assistant or something in the charity sector than I was as a design developer.
It's the same with me. I went in as administrator.
And you get in an administration or an operations role if you have those skills in the charity sector, and you can quickly learn. So I told my boss on the day when I was getting interviewed, you know, I'm coming here because I want to learn more about this, and I'm hoping that within a period of time I'd be able to do the job that they'd given me in about 3 days and spend 2 days a week upskilling myself with what I really wanted to do. And, you know, and you can do that in the charity sector. You know, they're quite flexible characters. I know, don't get me wrong, there's lots of organisations who might be more rigid, or there's lots of people who are used to drinking tea and eating biscuits all day as well, and committee meetings. But if you find the right charities or you find the right organisations, you can get a lot of rope. Just a top tip there. So
But I was thinking Grace did as well, so we've all come
Yeah,
from
definitely.
the charity sector.
and I think, but using that training ground, whether you're early in your career or whether you've come into it, or whether you're like, oh, this thing I want to do is not paying its way yet, what kinds of charities or organisations could I go and work with, or could use my career path and transferable skills to date with, to earn a living, build my networks, build allies and connections in different ways, to then progress my own ventures and ideas. So I'd say the same for someone like Vic Turnbull that some of you might have met. She worked with Uprising for years, and that was an organisation working with young people, and, you know, the networks that she built and the skills that she had at the point when she came out of Uprising and some work that she'd done on some like community radio stuff, she was more than ready to get running her own thing, because she'd everything that she was doing wasn't new to her. She was doing it for somebody else, learning how not to do it for somebody else's budget, and, you know, it's a really useful tool.
In quite a few ways, quite a lot of people that I've worked with have worked in a charity or a social enterprise. And because they're so flexible, they've supported them to develop their projects and help them to get funding. So that's word spin out. So they incubate you for a while, so you can sort of become a bit more sustainable.
And they might not know they're doing this. We're using this language. We're you know, they might just be glad that they've got somebody who's reliable, doing a good job, and blah, 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 and just happens to have all this energy and ideas that complement what they're doing. As long as you get your day job done, they'll let you tinker with other bits and pieces. And sorry, Nicola, let you know.
I've done something similar, but through volunteering.
Yeah.
So I'm learning by their mistakes. So it took the charity 2 years to get signed in the book. So
Really,
while everybody from us decided it from the day go, you know, even if it's one from my friends, there's still no issue.
And absolutely, whether it's paid work, which, you know, in an ideal world, people will apply for, be able to earn a living whilst they're doing what they're doing. But if they can't find that connection, or absolutely physically, you know, can't be seen to be employed or be working just yet for whatever's going on in their lives, you know, 2 or 3 days, whatever, a week or a month in a voluntary capacity can quickly get you in a similar place as well, depending on what you're prepared to do personally. So gone around the houses there, I just thought it was important to throw in that bit about that, you know, this working in places can be really helpful. In terms of where we've got, so again, so I worked with Unlimited off and on for years. I did all sorts. I think you do have to piece together where you've come from in order to find the right social venture or path or difference that you want to make. And that's why in our Time to Grow programs, we do spend quite a lot of time for the first sort of 2 or 3 sessions or days, really getting people to unpack who are you, where have you come from, what's this pathway you've been on, what are your assets and your attributes, and what's your style of being, whether that's the way you think, the way you work, what skills you have, what makes you tick. Because then you can bring all of that strength into what you're doing, and you know what you don't want to do, so that you kind of keep focused and you don't jump into the wrong sorts of partnerships or go and try and work in ways that are going to clash with like who you are and what you can do and that sort of thing. So in thinking this way, I guess, what can I tell you that's going to be of any use around Flourish? So I guess from our point of view, after I'd jumped from different jobs, you know, using my skills, like Nicki described, I was kind of invested in to continue work. So I worked with Unlimited off and on doing different things, but the last time that I worked for Unlimited, to be fair, I've gone back and done consultancy work with them since. I worked with 90 universities to get them to think differently about entrepreneurship, and we had this amazing £8 million funded programme. We had a ball, it was great. I think we supported getting on for 3,500 social entrepreneurs, intrapreneurs, so staff within universities, social entrepreneurs across the staff community who kind of doing it beyond the day job, and students and graduates and everybody else. But what happened was, nothing bugs me more than when big companies will have all this money, built this amazing reputation and all this work, and then the money stops and it's like, boom, right, move along, let's go and do place-based work, let's go and do what the next bit of policy tells us. And I just felt mortified and embarrassed that all this brilliant work had been started in universities, which was so hard to build, so hard to make work. I was not prepared to let it drop. So we said, you know, how's about, you know, the money's run out, but we think we can get 20 to 30 universities to pay us to keep working with them. And there was no one size fits all, unfortunately. And it was all, you know, negotiated different kind of consultancy work, basically, with all these universities. So I got to leave well, and with my reputation intact, and build a whole heap of new clients. I still work with some of these universities now. I've got to say, I know this is being recorded, I've backed off from working with universities. They frustrate me. They're too slow. They don't pay on time. So be very careful. You know, if you think, ooh, I'm working with such a university, run a mile. Is my top tips quite often for those sorts of organisations, unless you can see when you're getting paid. But basically, that was an example of this nest egg and this consultancy project that I designed. They let me leave, and I set up as a freelancer delivering work for them and various other things. So that's one way that I sort of evolved, and it gave me the buffer and the relationships. But I think with Flourish, just coming back to where you get started, we knew, you know, alongside my paid work, whatever that was, whether it was in an organisation or delivering my own sort of new consultancy programs and different things, I knew it was going to take a while for Flourish to flourish, I suppose, well before it was even called Flourish. And I was happy. You have to set your terms and your parameters, otherwise you get cranky and time runs away with you. So I knew that I could gift a day a week, possibly, or I could certainly gift 2 days a month to do the development of the organisation. And for the first year, 2 days a month of my time were there to make sure that we could run and operate. And that was, you know, planning stuff out, getting people to things and putting on events to get people together. And for a good year or two, maybe not a little bit longer, we ran these monthly peer learning events that built our network, built our trust. It gave, and I'd still do that now. If there was no money and that we couldn't find work, I'm always very kind of key on consistency and, you know, making sure that they can't take the core away from us. So, you know, come what may, we'd always run a monthly peer learning event on our own time if we had to, because it's you know, it keeps the ship moving forward. And we basically use this ship to pilot all manner of things. I think we spent 2 or 3 years piloting thematic events. And, you know, I mean, this is very, very, you know, when I look at this is what we were doing years ago, basically, but probably quarterly, and we weren't being paid for it. And then after maybe 18 months or so, we'd certainly got pockets of money, but the money we got was for research. You know, the money was for research around women change makers. It was for research into things that we already wanted to do. And we built our business knowledge, our values, intelligence, and all these other things that we talk about through other people's money. You know, they got their policy report, or they got their information, and we built the foundations for what we were doing. And we're still doing that now. Some of you will know we did for the GMCA the other year, they wanted to look into how they should recommission women's centres, and doing that piece of research and that report helped us build links with people we wanted to build links with. It opened our eyes to a different side of supporting women that we'd not fully appreciated, and that's helped us in the way that we design and do what we do now. And likewise, Business Growth Hub, they needed to do some research to find out what startup social enterprises needed. We put in a proposal. I think we were one of 6 to say we do this way, and we're the best people to do it because, you know, we're already doing it. You know, there's nothing new to create. We're already what happens with these proposals that come out is they're often very short turnaround to just get the proposal in, and then you've got to deliver the work yesterday. And if you can't work that way, then that's probably not an income stream source for you. But if you are quite fast thinking and fast paced, it's quite an easy way to hoover up money that helps you research what it is you're doing and get paid to deliver what you want to plan anyway. Don't get me wrong, that money doesn't come around every day, and you have to know certain people or be going to certain networks or have certain contacts to be able to spot where those opportunities come up, but they're well worth.
I wonder if it'd be interesting for the panel just to talk a little bit. So obviously we've heard a bit about how you might have to do some unpaid work, and it's quite useful to bound that in terms of your time, so that you can bring in some money and support yourself. But then making that shift to paying customers. So how do you find your top tips?
So
how do you find
Do
your
you have a
customers?
question?
I was thinking about, you know, when you getting all this funding and you're searching for the funding, and you have to keep looking for this and looking for that. Don't you get tiring, you know, all the time having to do that? And, you know, and then when you finally can pay yourself or someone's paying you, don't you get exhausted with having to look for this bid, that bid, and then you get turned down, and then, you know, because your life depends on it, doesn't it?
And well, we never looked for funding at the start, and it's only through COVID, you're just going back to that point, where's your money coming from? For us, our money was coming from people paying us to do social enterprise consultancy, and people paying us to deliver social enterprise support programs. And what we found is that although it was a bit harder at the start, because we were still working out what's the model, what are we offering people, how do we know it works? Now we know all that, and we've got that evidence in spades, and thankfully, you know, to Nicki working with us a few years back to pin down a lot of this stuff, and then, you know, us knowing how to do this, we do social impact measurement work a lot so that we can keep our information up to date. I've already got the impact reports for the time to grow programs, and the stats are insane in terms of what it's achieved, and it sets us apart from what our competitors could say that they could do. It sounds very clinical there, doesn't it? But but actually it's shocked us and what we can do, and we want to do better on that. So money wise, we don't tend to go for loads of funding if we can help it, because it's a pain in the neck. You go very targeted for specific projects. We don't need you, we try not to need you for these funds that come out, because it can just do your head in.
Whichever way you need to look at it. I mean, I sort of like, what gets me up in the morning. So the work I do is my passion, is what I live for. It's not a job, it's what I do. And my sort of drive is to be able to show people that they can develop sustainable living in doing what they're passionate about. But that doesn't mean it's easy. Sometimes it's harder because you've got really strong values and ethics. So you're not going to take every opportunity that comes along, and you will cross with people that, you think, I can't work with them because they just don't fit in my, and that's the hardest thing about being a social entrepreneur. It is deciding, where you want to go and who you want, and you make mistakes. The amount of times, that I've ended up having to walk away from something because I know it's going to make me ill. So one thing we do have to do is protect ourselves, and I think that's the harder work for us as social entrepreneurs than it is, for people who just go and get a job and will do consultancy just for the money, because it has to have purpose for us. So yeah, all of us will tell you that it's not easy. It really isn't, but it's so worth it when you get on the other side of it, which, Grace will tell you. Most of my clients, it's around 4 years that they'll start to be able to make that decision. You get to a crossroads. You get to that crossroads that you can actually go, right, okay, I need to do this full time.
And some people can't wait 4 years, or they think they can't wait 4 years. But actually, if you're doing some sort of job that's related to what you're doing anyway, part-time, full-time, volunteer or otherwise, whilst building what you're doing, there's ways of making sure that you don't go bankrupt and you don't go.
Potentially it will all happen a bit more quickly if it's aligned and you're building those skills as well.
Yeah.
Did you have a question too?
Yes, I have a question. It was on when you were talking about universities. So my question is, because you gave an example, a good example, and then because give it us run away from. So my question is does it the partnership that probably we made to work with certain universities to be profitable and to benefit us, does it depend on probably what type of relationship? Are they probably beneficial in terms of tapping into the resource that they have, especially when we want students who are doing research work to come and help us capture information and help us produce reports at the end of.
I think it's understanding where the money's coming from in anybody, whether it's a university or anyone else. And so universities, we could just quickly map out. I mean, universities, there's money to be paid as guest lecturers. There's money to be paid as a partner delivering something that they might need. Some universities might pay you to place students, like social work students, for example. Where there are specialist research and consultancy opportunities, they don't come up very often, and you've really got to network hard and know who you're dealing with to go in for those sorts of opportunities. But certainly around enterprise research and innovation across different faculties, you might develop a relationship with the university faculty as a guest lecturer or some way or other, and then learn, what are they running, where have they got loads of money from to do stuff. Who do they need to buy in to get their job done? And do you fit with what it is they've got money to spend on? That's one way around it. But the student picture is a slightly different thing where you might get paid to place somebody somewhere, but that's a fiddly thing in itself, because recruiting the right one, managing them and having somewhere for them to work is something to think about, depending on what you're doing. You know, Nicki might have obviously some other thoughts on this as well, but often students they want you to pay them. Some universities will want you to pay 2 or 3 grand for a student, you know, because they don't want all their students to be on paid work. You know, young people today, it's good for them, you know, don't want to work for free, and it's like, well, you know, sometimes there's a lost leader in there, or it depends what the work is, to be fair, but they're trying to, there's paid internships, and then there's kind of discrete projects and work experience type stuff. So it's quite complicated working with universities to work out where is the money, who's the relationship you need to build with whom, and where's the front door to get in there anyway. But if people want to work with universities, there's a good chance between me, Nicki, and a few other people we know work with unis, we could help you find the right route in.
Is that what exactly you were asking about, or were you asking about how do you get a student to come and work with you?
Yeah, especially for, like, example, research students where they're actually looking for places where they can go and get some data, even for themselves, for their research.
Yes.
So
That's exactly where I work at the moment. So in the university stuff, just sort of back that up, you know, I started within sort of working in universities as part of my master's. So I started off from that point, went on to do my PhD, which is on hold at the moment.
And you have to, just as the top tip there, be very careful, because they will milk you dry for your time.
And so I've been doing then obviously as a guest lecturer, and you know, now as a social entrepreneur in residence. So, and it's been through the fact that in terms of the qualification that I have, there's only 5 of us in the UK that have that social enterprising management qualification, an MBA. So it's about getting, if you're working in universities, there's 2 sides. You've got the academic side, you've got professional services. If you don't work on the academic side, they don't pay you a lot at all. It's terrible.
That's the milk you dry bit.
Yeah, they will milk you dry.
Milk the students, milk anyone that you get.
Professional services are always looking for organisations to work with, and that's where I was just going to take it to. So with Sheffield, one of the reasons I was brought in was to connect them with social enterprises. So there's been a huge shift in politics in universities in what they have to report on. And one of the huge things they have to report on is value back into the community. Universities notoriously cannot connect with the community, they're terrible. Any public service we would think they would be, but they're not. You know, they don't, you know, they have their own languages, they're quite standoffish, you know. So placing a student with a social enterprise or with a charity or any sort of purpose organisation is huge at the moment, you know. As far as I know with Sheffield, they don't charge. They pay for that student to be placed with you, and they also do.
They won't
that's
pay you, they'll pay the student.
Yeah, so it's a good rate. Yeah, I'll just go to.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just had a question about what
Grace.
said. I'm part of the group of community cooks and cooking workshops, and you know, stakeholders don't seem to be. They like what we do, but nobody's put the money where the mouth is. But I was at a community meeting last week, and one of the community leaders of the community centre said, "Oh yeah, we love cooking workshops." And I said, "Who for?" And he said, "Well, you know, people here, they don't come out, we put things on and nobody comes, and you know, but I really like marketing and advertising, and you know, so they've got funding." But then I'm thinking, there's this terrible stigma that the community centre board have of the people around. There is a lot of crime, there is a lot of, you know, there's a high rise of crime and burglaries and so on and so forth. And the people in the community that attend the community centre are very critical about the people outside the community. They say they don't access the services. So I'm wondering, like, where to go.
I would say that's probably right. They don't access the services. If they've got that opinion of them, yeah, then they're not helping themselves, are they? That happens a lot.
I did actually say in the community meeting, and I said, well, that's because of a series of generations
Yes.
of systematic, systems not meeting people's needs. So it's not people's fault, it's the system's fault. And I made that very clear. But yeah, I'm just wondering, like, how do we do that, because we're not from that area. And I always think I'm kind of thinking need to knock on people's doors and start.
It's wondering whether I can think of a few examples of this sort of stuff, or whose job it was to go and do that. And you've got a couple of options. So, can they be convinced that they need a part-time or an associate community engagement worker?
Got one.
Okay.
Well,
An effective one.
They need sacking. Yeah. I don't know. Or maybe they need training. Maybe that, who is this person? Have they been thrown in at the deep end? Do they know what they're doing? Could your organisation train them in community outreach and blah blah blah? I don't know. But there's either convincing them they need this role and convincing them that you're all the person for the job. There's convincing them they need training, or creating some events that you pull together and facilitate to better boost what it is they need to do. Or there's finding your own funding to do what they should be doing if they're never going to do it. Would be my sort of 3 routes forward on that. But it's tricky when there's politics and relationships, and you've got to not tread on people's toes. But I don't know, perhaps one of those options or a combination of things might help move things along.
I think one of the ways that they might be able to solve that is to put out to the community to come with some ideas, because it's a lot of the time within communities, it's a case of we're doing this to people.
Community soups or things like that are a way that you could bring your cooking in, as well as get some money and some within the people to build their own ideas.
I mean, one of the ways might be, if it's around sort of food, is to open up for people in the community to come and share their recipes, their food, to bring that in. And to everything comes from the community in, not the other way around. And that's where there generally tends to be an issue that, people say, right, we're doing this with the community, and they develop
the community
them
over there.
Yeah.
Brought in as, love this Grace's model.
Yeah,
the beneficiaries are the people who are running this and doing this. I'm conscious we're just moving into community engagement here, which is something that we'll be coming on to in another session. I've got one more question for the panel, and then if I can open up the floor for questions, and Tina's going to be first. So we've touched on this slightly, but as a last question to everyone, are there any other ways that we haven't talked about which you'd recommend for finding customers, finding paying customers, and generating income?
I think they're all around you. That's such a simple answer, isn't it? But it's good to remember, and I feel like I needed this reminder last week, to be honest, that you focus on the delivery for so long that you forget that, everyone in this room, all the relationships that you have are potential opportunities for joint funding, for tapping into their network, and vice versa. So to make it
referrals and trusted referrals.
Yeah, referrals. If they're going in for a funding bid, could you be included in it? If you're just getting on with people, you can kind of forget that they are opportunities, and you can do so much more together. So I think just that very simple, use your network and work together, you're stronger together. You can bring different facets to either a funding bid or to an offer to a customer, and having a system in place, even if it's just a list. So I have a spreadsheet of all the people that may have emailed me or I've met, who, if I didn't put it in that spreadsheet, I'd kind of meet them again in 6 months' time, and an opportunity could have been lost. And it's quite a boring tip, but I really do appreciate it, recommend it.
It's analysis of what you're doing.
It is, and you can kind of see things chug forward slowly. I look at my spreadsheet every week and think, oh yeah, I said I was going to email them, maybe have a meeting with them about how we could work together on this element, or they mentioned that in a meeting, and I thought, well, that'd be good to follow up. if I didn't go back to that list, it just wouldn't happen.
That's a great
So-
tip. And obviously things change as well. So in 6 months' time, there might not have been anything to talk to this person about, but there is.
Yeah, and I would have, and I put people back on that spreadsheet who I forgot existed, because you meet so many, don't you? So yeah, it's just a very simple one, but very much worth doing.
I might just build on that if I can around the analysis bit, because that's what came to mind for me, is people don't analyse what they're doing, they don't track what they're doing, and then that tells you everything you need to know. So although it sounds boring, it's brilliant. As an example, I was with somebody on Friday looking at, you know, what's the quickest way they're going to be able to get money into their organisation. And yes, there's looking at funding and fundraising, and there's looking at possible contracts and things like that. But who are they trading with now? Getting repeat business is far easier than starting from scratch. And whether that's repeat stuff with certain clients or partners or funders, but what's been your track record today, and using whether you're tracking your bank statement, the invoices coming in and invoices going out, and really looking at where's the money flowing in here, and who are these people, and how do we find more of them. So with this particular person, we went back over who were all her, and they weren't all paying actually, who'd been her clients for the last couple of years, and there was about 35 clients, and there was about good 8 to 10 of those had been free pro bono work, but until you write this down and realise just what you're giving away for free and what you're not, you can't put a tap on it or stop hemorrhaging things. So we looked at the different clients that she's got, we looked at what sectors they're working in. She's clearly got case studies and potential testimonials from all of these different clients that she can then use to try new clients once she realises, oh, well, I work with sports clubs, oh, well, I work with retail people, oh, well, I work with women's organisations. You know, tracking, you know, who's warmed to my work, who's happy with our services, and what other people like them might I be able to find once I realise who it is I'm dealing with. So that was a useful exercise to go through all of that. And for the free stuff that she'd been giving away, and will continue to, it's part of her CSR, I guess, to at least 2 organisations a year she'll do free work with. That's no problem, but let's map it down. If she's worked with 10 organisations and given them, you know, 350 to 500 pounds a year's free support, if not more, let's write that down. And then when she's going for funding, or she's going to the council, or she's going somewhere else, to say, you need to work with me, or you need to fund me, because we're investing X thousand pounds in investment in this community every year. You know, it's showing that the free work isn't free, and that actually you can use that evidence as a positive going forward, because not, you know, other companies like her aren't doing that, and other organisations, even social enterprises, might not be working with the range of people she is, or doing it in quite that way. So those are my
absolutely. And
tips
just you touched on it, your existing customers are the people most likely to buy from you in the future. So you should proportionally be spending time marketing to them, whether it's, you know, showing them the impact of the projects you've done with them, the projects you've done with other people. The most potential will come from existing customers.
Picking up on that word customer, often when in our programs, and it's just a reminder for anyone who's not been to our programs, you know, customers, beneficiaries and stakeholders are 3 different things, and sometimes they align and sometimes they don't in social enterprise. Customer is who is paying you to deliver something. Your beneficiaries, who's benefiting, and it might be that your customers and beneficiaries are the same, but usually they're not. Your customer might be the council, or your customer might be a housing association, or your customer might be a university, or a funder, or somebody else. Your beneficiaries are who's coming to stuff, who's benefiting, who's experiencing what you have to offer, and stakeholders are like the whole soup of people, the customers, beneficiaries, and then the other strategic interested groups. So, sorry, Nicki.
No, it's okay. I would add an advocate that to get some funding for doing stakeholder engagement, and use that stakeholder engagement. So what we do with the stakeholder engagement, we create a visionary document, like a discussion paper, and then go out and talk to people about it. Now, that is unbelievable marketing, because you're actually saying to somebody, I want your opinion on this. And they're quite privileged to be able to give you their opinion. And that opens so many doors just by doing that exercise.
Whether it's the community that you want to serve, or whether it's going to all those contacts that you want to talk to, or past customers who you forgot to ask what they made of what you did, or it's a bit like a 360 review sometimes.
And some of the ways is, well, I did this a lot in the early days, was to, if you've got LinkedIn, populate your LinkedIn, and then when you're ready, just actually send them a message and say, I've got this concept that I'd like to have a chat with you about. You're all right to spend 5 minutes, over coffee, or virtually, so can I ask you about this? Works absolutely brilliantly. So there's some great ways.
So what do you mean by populate your LinkedIn?
Oh, so add people. Oh, sorry about that. Just go. It took me years to do that. Is to just add those people. So you might not be wanting to do anything with them right now, but just add them so that when you're ready, you can have a look, and it works incredibly. Going in that process, and it does open doors. Third thing is to say, social entrepreneurs do business with social entrepreneurs. Very, very different market. They're going to buy through trust. So it's developing that trust.
Easier sell.
Yeah, it's your easier sell to trade with other social entrepreneurs. We forget that the voluntary sector is a massive commissioner in its own right. We think we've got to go to the council, we've got to go to the corporate, this and that, but there's money sloshing around the voluntary community sector constantly. I mean, when sort of when Flourish was first set up, that's what we saw of the power of that right at the beginning. And you sort of saw it, and Grace is hugely a result of this, a product of this, our Flourish Network buying services from Flourish Network. And it has been notorious for the last
positive words,
6 or 7 years. So use the networks that you have as well, because you've already built that trust. But it's a huge thing with social entrepreneurs. They will buy if they trust you, and they will recommend. So I've never marketed in sort of like the 20 years. I've never sold my services. We want to see each
other do well, don't we? So I think that's the kind of cultural thing that ripples on year, and
so if I see something for Flourish or for any of my other clients, then I'll go, oh, I've seen this for you, I'll recommend you, so that's a huge way through.
Thank you. So I think we'll just have a few minutes for questions. We're also, just to bear in mind, after we've had a lunch break, we're going to have some roundtable discussions. So there's more opportunity to talk in more depth about some
contributing to captive there.
Yeah, absolutely. But if we've got any questions we'd like to ask the panel now, and then I'll explain how we're going to set up the roundtables afterwards. Tina.
Thank you. Not a question, it's more a comment really. This has been so helpful, I think, in terms of
nothing much, and everyone's really quiet.
No, it's amazing. Like, in terms of, so yes, I've picked up on some things that I can do differently and some new ideas, but actually in terms of my confidence, like it feels like yesterday that I registered my kick, but actually I'm now well into my 3rd year. The whole way along I've been engaging with Flourish in their, with business development. I'm doing everything that you've all done, and just seeing that kind of, it's been a struggle, but actually somehow I'm right on track without there being any tracks. If that makes sense. I'm doing survey, doing stakeholder engagement. I did that work from university last year. I still haven't gotten paid for, so I totally hear that. The first year I was in business, I was furloughed, so through that 2nd year I had a part-time job, which was in EDI, so that's in my field. Now about to leave that, feeling the fear, doing it full time,
with a whole heap of new connections, hopefully, that you can then hammer if they'll let you.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I love them. Yeah. It isn't, it isn't easy. But if you take those planning steps that you're doing, it will be successful and it'll be sustainable. And that's the most important thing. You know, some organisations will just go for bits, or they will sell themselves out completely to funders, ticking their boxes, and there's no longevity in that. You know,
I wonder if I'd have had, if what I've done over the last 3 years had been in some kind of action plan or strategy plan, would I have stuck to it?
No, it changes with social enterprise. And I know I said about doing a business plan, that's purely for the funder. So that's purely for the next stage. Or if you want to go for a contract or something, you have to have a business plan. It's more like a funding proposal than it is a business plan. But what I always say is, well, this is great, it sits there, but being a social entrepreneur, because we're always respondent to need, it will change every 3 months. If not more rapidly, you know, so it has to be sort of movable. And the way I do that usually is, you know, you've got your core business, but then you have the projects coming off there, you know, because, you know, something will happen, you go, oh, I've got another project.
And that's what keeps you excited. You know, I think we'd all get bored if we started off in year 1 and 7 years down the line we're doing exactly the same thing. That's why we're attracted to this world. But I'm very conscious we've talked for nearly 2 hours and condensed a lot of pain and misery and years, you know, and it's all amazing, and I'm sure we're all as grateful as each other that we're doing it, but it is hard. And I guess my tip there is it's still absolutely worth doing, but this is where the network is so important. You're going to get days where you think, oh God, this is just draining me. Your resilience is your number 1 asset, because all of this needs motivation. You're going out and you're going to sell your organisation in whatever way works for you. Tap into that resilience through tapping into whatever networks you find gives you that energy.
Sorry, but age as well. I'm 50 something.
I'm the same.
But I just feel like I'm just starting, even though obviously I've had other jobs and whatever. But this passion of mine, I feel like it's going against me in my head. Do organisations look at age?
Definitely not.
Well, age is experience.
Well,
it depends how you want to spin it, doesn't it? And if you need some, you know, life coaching or counselling or something to help you unpick this and restack things, sometimes whatever's niggling away, if it's a confidence thing, sometimes coming to things like this can be the worst thing, because then you can think, oh God, all these people know all this stuff, and I've not done this yet, and I'm a million miles off or whatever. So sometimes if you're feeling a bit like that, one-to-one support and remembering that life coaching and counselling are actually really good business development tools, which is why we started to build them in on certain programs. And
it's also just starting to think about your whole person, and your age is part of it, and
an asset.
And an asset, exactly.
On the flip side, when I started, people thought I was the apprentice, and that, you know,
I was 23 when I started as well, so yeah.
So you can see it as a barrier yourself, can't you? And then you've kind of got to get over that and think, no, actually, I'm here and I'm doing this and I'm motivated because I've got something of value. But that was definitely in my head more than anybody else's. And I think, whether it's life coaching or whatever, you've got to become at peace and be strong with where you're at, because nobody else is thinking that.
And find the value in it.
I think self-care has been quite a running theme for the last few years. I think COVID brought it to a head, and it's something that we're wrong with, which is why we've got our like pop-up spa days and things like that, and other opportunities to help people to sort of connect. Because what I find is a lot of the voluntary community organisations out there, they don't, or they haven't been running consistent social enterprise support. They haven't been running consistent networking and connection building even. So there's a couple of them now doing a bit more, or they'll only ever do what they're funded to do. And I think that's where, networks like this, we can fill the gaps and we can build consistency where the others haven't caught up yet, and they've not recognised it because they're not funded to do it. So
I've got a client, and he's 82, and he started social enterprise 3 years ago, and he wished it, and it was, he got the bug later on in life. So he spent a whole corporate life, retired, and he started to. So he's a poet. A comedy poet, and he started doing stuff in residential homes. Now he works in prisons. And he's 82. Yeah, but what he's doing now is inspiring more
Yeah.
people his age.
Yeah, right, to get up and do
You know,
it.
to get up and do it. And you have a shift, certainly I notice that I feel differently now than I did when I was in my 20s. You know, I won't want to go back there. You know, I'm quite happy as I am now, you know, sat here now. And yeah, so we're getting quite a lot of older social entrepreneurs coming forward and saying, you know, well, actually, I've got to this point in my life where I actually want to do something I'm passionate about. So yeah, so never think you're too old, totally. And that wisdom that you have is huge. I would value that wisdom that you have and the experience you have. So.
Thank you.
Any more questions for the panel before we move into our lunch break?
Can I quickly mention another
Please do,
student
yeah.
thing? We talked a lot about unis, but there's Q steps at MMU. I forgot we also took advantage of University of Manchester's business school. The MBA students in their first year have to do a real life project with a social cause, and that's purely business planning. So I would recommend you choose the right time for that. If it's too early, they're going to be going in too hard. They're like mega ambitious, enthusiastic, but you need that at the right time for when they can do focus groups with potential customers, they can do forecasts for you. You know, you need to have a little bit of that in place, I would say, or at least have an idea of where you're going to direct them to. Yeah, they were very self-motivated and capable, but you still need to be very defined in your brief and where you're going to direct their energy
and have time to spend.
Yeah, it's not outsource and hand me a business plan in 3 months, please. You need to invest as well. But that was really great for us to have some focus and fresh eyes from people outside the organisation, and it was free.
We're just, I know it's completely different, but just on the thing, other universities beyond Manchester do still help people in Manchester as well. So we're about to start taking on a student or two from Lancaster and helping us look at our sort of carbon footprint, climate change, net zero type stuff. They've basically they need to place all these students in that ilk. And whilst I don't need them to start doing anything major, what happens is universities will be quite flexible with you if you need something slightly different from what they think they want. And so I'm going to get these students to come and design some training for people like you or anyone else. So we're going to get we've learned lately, we've mapped about 300 sustainable, environmental, low carbon economy type social ventures in Manchester, and many of them we don't work with. You know, but it's a real big policy agenda thing. There's going to be lots of money coming forward to help more green type businesses, and they're thinking of tech and they're thinking of transport and all stuff. They're not thinking of social enterprises. So we need to better equip our social ventures to understand how to tap into this sector and this money and this stuff. So anyway,
we've got an NHS graduate starting with us as well. So the NHS do a graduate programme. And they have to do placements within social enterprise.
I need to write a little bit of a blog,
So yeah,
blog on some of these opportunities and put it on the website so that people can spot what's about. Cool.
Brilliant. Well, I'd just like to say thank you to our panel. It was
It's been great.
We're just going to
stop the call.
It's nice to sit here and talk and ask you questions, and rather than busy working away.
But hopefully this afternoon